People are saying Hasan's losing his mind right now. What's going on?
Sorry, John. In service of those war crimes.
Oh no, now he's watching Boner Box. This is all coming from the Empanada video?
On October the 7th, babies were baked in ovens, babies were ripped from their mother's wombs. October 7th was bad enough, but Elon had to exaggerate it for atrocity purposes. Those tweets are still up. Why would you trust anything this man says to you tonight? Look, he's here. He's here.
Based. Federalist number 7. The same subject continued concerning dangers from dissensions between the states. Again, from our good friend, Alexander Hamilton. Wait, fuck. Hold on 1 second, and then we'll read this. Or actually, wait. Here, listen to our good friend Hasan in the back.
Let's assume that every case that Mehdi put forward was true. When he talks about particular...
I mean, it is, but okay.
...instance, like the WCK bombing, or the person who was... the child who was shot while they were in a car, or like all this kind of stuff. So if they're talking about that, then it's kind of like saying that doesn't really... You could just argue none of that actually says whether or not the broad military campaign is justified or not. You understand that, right?
So apparently the fact that Israel is clearly systematically committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, pretty much every international crime that you could ever think of, on a mass scale, patterns that make it clear that they are there in order to do what they are literally doing. We, however, cannot judge their so-called military campaign by what they are doing. The fact that they are doing these things says nothing about whether them doing those things is actually justified or not. Apparently, in order to deduce why Israel is doing what it is doing in Gaza, we can't look at what it's doing in Gaza. You know, like destroying 60% of all buildings in the territory, many of them through literal controlled demolitions. Schools, mosques, churches, museums, all destroyed intentionally. Massacring endless scores of civilians with numbers that are simply impossible to achieve unless it is being done intentionally. We apparently can't look at that and say, yeah, they're there because they want to kill the civilians. That's why they're killing them. They're there because they want to expel the civilians. That's why they are expelling them. They're destroying every single building there because they want to destroy it. Because they want to destroy Gaza. No, 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 no. You can't do that. Why? He just sort of decided you can't. That really is all there is to it. That's his argument. And that is aside from, you know, all of the undeniable statements, plans, etc. coming from the Israeli state that make it very clear that this is what they want to do from the very beginning, and it's what they have been doing, and that they are going to continue to be doing it, like their leaked plans to do exactly what they are doing, which filtered out already in October 2023, people at the highest levels of government outright saying that that is what they are doing. They openly discuss plans to build concentration camps in Gaza, which the survivors will be hoarded into for threat of death if they try to leave. The Israeli military just openly declaring today, as I film this video, that they have no intention to allow the residents of the northern Gaza Strip to return to their homes, and that anyone in the entire northern half of Gaza is not a civilian who they can just freely kill. Ignore all of that, right? Or try to frame it as if it's not indicative of broad Israeli policy.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. Is he having fun over here? One of the nice things about Hasan getting kind of like de-added or whatever is that now we can open a stream. We don't have to worry about ads popping up. That's nice, at least. Federalist number 7. The same subject continued concerning dangers from dissensions between the states. It is sometimes asked, with an air of seeming triumph, what inducements... Okay, this word was the word of the week. I think if I control F induce, I bet I'm going to see it over 100 fucking times between these 10 Federalist Papers. They love this word. Okay, never mind. Okay, John Jay was just obsessed with this word. I'm so sorry. I assumed Hamilton was as well. My bad, whatever. John Jay writes it a lot. Hamilton doesn't. He only does one time. Fuck you. Okay. I didn't pre-read. I'm sorry. How does Hasan make money if he gets no ads? Does he have sponsors or something? Subs he still gets a lot of money for. I don't know what his Twitch contract is or if he even had one for the past year, but... Oh, and all of his Patreons for his podcasts. It is sometimes asked, with an air of seeming triumph, what inducements could the states have, if disunited, to make war upon each other? Bro, we get it. How many times are you going to argue this? Wait, did we just do this? No, it's the same shit. I guess it says the same subject continued. Okay, whatever. It would be a full answer to this question to say precisely the same inducements which have at different times deluged in blood all the nations in the world. But unfortunately for us, the question admits of a more particular answer. There are causes of differences within our immediate contemplation of the tendency of which, even under the restraints of a federal constitution, we have had sufficient experience to enable us to form a judgment of what might be expected if those restraints were removed. Territorial disputes have, at all times, been found one of the most fertile sources of hostility among nations. Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars that have desolated the earth have sprung from this origin. This cause would exist among us in full force. We have a vast tract of unsettled territory within the boundaries of the United States. There still are discordant and undecided claims between several of them, and the dissolution of the Union would lay a foundation for similar claims between them all. It is well known that they have heretofore had serious and animated discussion concerning the rights to the lands which were ungranted at the time of the Revolution, and which usually went under the name of Crown lands. Actually, here's a question. I have no idea what the answer is. Is the territory of the 13 colonies, did any of those state borders change after the colonies were founded, were like the Articles of Confederation versus like the States of America, like the federal government was formed? Did the borders of these colonies like ever change much, or? Yes. Oh, okay. Apparently they have. West Virginia carved out of Virginia. Vermont seceded from New York, and Virginia and North Carolina CT had disputed boundaries out west. What's the purpose of this question? Of what question? I was just curious. Am I not allowed to be curious? The states within the limits of whose colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all that parts... Wait, hold on. The states within the limits of those of whose colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all that part of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain till it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. Oh, that there are competing claims for, well, who actually is right when deciding who the land was assigned to, basically. Okay. This, it has been said, was at all events an acquisition to the Confederacy by compact with a foreign power. It has been the prudent policy of Congress to appease this controversy by prevailing upon the states to make concessions to the United States for the benefit of the whole. This has been so far accomplished as, under a continuation of the Union, to afford a decided prospect of an amicable termination of the dispute. A dismemberment of the Confederacy, however, would revive this dispute and would create others on the same subject. At present, a large part of the vacant Western Territory is, by cession at least, if not by any anterior right, the common property of the Union. If that were at an end, the states which made the cession on a principle of federal compromise would be apt, when the motive of the grant has ceased, to reclaim the lands as a reversion. The other states would no doubt insist on a proportion by right of representation. Their argument would be that a grant, once made, could not be revoked, and that the justice of participating in territory acquired or secured by the joint efforts of the Confederacy remained undiminished. If, contrary to probability, it should be admitted by all the states that each had a right to a share of this common stock, there would still be a difficulty to be surmounted as to a proper rule of apportionment. Different principles would be set up by different states for this purpose. And as they would affect the opposite interests of the parties, they might not easily be susceptible to of a Pacific adjustment. So basically saying like they've already kind of like apportioned out a lot of the territory based on the union that they had, and if the Articles of Confederation were to dissolve and everybody be individual states or for different unions, like how the fuck are they going to go back and decide, well, who actually gets what based on the land that they all acquired, as part of a confederated states? Holton argues in this essay that doling out land that was apportioned under the current union in the absence of another union would be impossible and would lead to conflict. You have no real positions and don't have the facts. You just make up convincing arguments. Destiny. Okay. True. In the wide field of Western territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. To reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. If people disagree enough, they're going to fight over it. The circumstances of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania, respecting the land of Wyoming, admonish us not to be sanguine in expecting an easy accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation obliged the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. But Connecticut gave strong indications of dissatisfaction with that termination, nor did she appear to be entirely resigned to it till, by negotiation and management, something like an equivalent was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended to convey the slightest censure on the conduct of that state. She no doubt sincerely believed herself to have been injured by the decision, and states, like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage. Just talking about a disagreement two states have and how it was settled by the federal government. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy between this state and the District of Vermont can vouch the opposition we experienced, as well from states not interested as from those which were interested in the claim, and can attest the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed had this state attempted to assert its right by force. Obviously, if we would have fought, there would have been a big fight, because they would have fought. Two motives prepondered in that opposition. One, a jealousy entertained of our future power, and the other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states who had obtained grants of lands under the actual government of that district. Even the states which brought forward claims in contradiction to ours seemed more solicitous to dismember this state than to establish their own pretensions. These were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. New Jersey and Rhode Island, upon all occasions, discovered a warm zeal for the independence of Vermont, and Maryland, till alarmed by the appearance of a connection between Canada and that state, entered deeply into the same views. These being small states saw an unfriendly eye the perspective of our growing greatness. In a review of these transactions, we may trace some of the causes. In a review of these transactions, we may trace some of the causes which would be likely to embroil the states with each other if it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. So basically, I think he's just saying, like, here's all the motives that these states had that they could have fought with each other over these land grabs, but because they were part of a federal government, they didn't go to war with each other, which is good. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. The states less favorably circumstanced would be desirous of escaping from the disadvantages of local situation and of sharing in the advantages of their more fortunate neighbors. Each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions which would beget discontent. The habits of intercourse on the basis of equal privileges, to which we have been accustomed since the earliest settlement of the country, would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have independent of this circumstance. In all caps he spams, we should be ready to denominate injuries those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent sovereignties consulting a distinct interest. Injuries, those things which are in reality the just. We should be ready to denominate injuries those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent sovereign consulting a distinct interest. We should be ready to denominate. So we should be willing to say that there was a party, I guess, that was injured, even if that injury was the justifiable act of some other entity which had like an interest of its own, basically. Efforts of intercourse and the basic group religious which we've been accustomed to. Can you actually those causes of discontent actually have independent circumstances? I guess, right? The spirit of enterprise, which characterizes the commercial part of America, has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved. It is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. The infractions of these regulations on one side, the efforts to prevent and repel them on the other, would naturally lead to outrages, and these to reprisals and wars. Basically, that each state would be self-interested, and they would make like deals with each other and other people, and would violate deals or whatever that would be more favorable to them than to other states or confederacies, I guess, right? The opportunities which some states would have of rendering others tributary to them by commercial regulations would be impatiently submitted to by the tributary states. The relative situation of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey would afford an example of this kind. New York, from the necessities of revenue, must lay duties on her importations. A great part of these duties must be paid by the inhabitants of the two other states in the capacity of consumers of what we import. Ah, look, even they understood that tariffs were just a tax on the end consumer. New York would neither be willing nor able to forego this advantage. Her citizens would not consent that a duty paid by them should be remitted in favor of the citizens of her neighbors, nor would it be practical, if there were not this impediment in the way, to distinguish the customers in our own markets. Would Connecticut and New Jersey long submit to be taxed by New York for her exclusive benefit? Should we be long permitted to remain in the quiet and undisturbed enjoyment of a metropolis, from the possessions of which we derived an advantage so odious to our neighbors and, in their opinion, so oppressive? Should we be able to preserve it against the incumbent weight of Connecticut on the one side and the cooperating pressure of New Jersey on the other? These are questions that temerity alone will answer in the affirmative. Basically saying that like they enjoy a particular type of rent, basically that they have access to these ports and control these ports, and that the neighbors around them are probably going to go to war with them and fight over it if they're not going to be happy having things like imported that they're going to have to pay a tax on and everything, right? Hold on one second. It's our friend going over.
Loner Box is even worse than the extremist Zionists who openly advocate for genocide, because Loner Box's entire project is erasing the thought that people with that mindset exist and run political scene within Israel.
True. Loner Box is worse than me.
Those he pretends don't exist. He argues with Zionists who spout the pro-genocide insanity that Loner Box pretends is impossible to imagine being actual beliefs. No, I don't know what Vosh's positions are. I haven't kept up with anything he's done, but I doubt that he's pro-Israel. I think at most he will probably do like the Hasan is wrong because he's like defending the Ansar Allah administration's attempts of trying to stop Israel from conducting a genocide. But beyond that, I don't think he would go so far as to be
Ansar Allah
like,
shit is so fucking cringe. It's just another name for basically the Houthi government. I don't know if he says it because he wants to sound more brown or Middle Eastern or like fucking up on Middle East. It's so cringe. He's so fucking cringe.
That they are being conned into eventually becoming Zionists themselves and nodding along to the kind of genocide justifying propaganda that we've gone over here, then you should check out that video that I made on the matter, which is very long but nonetheless goes over it in depth and uses Loner Box specifically as an example of this phenomenon. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here about liberal Zionism and what it is. I feel like you might have already gotten the gist from this video. But yeah, if you want more of an in-depth look at it, I suggest you check out that video. Point is, don't be duped by these people. They have shown their whole ass. It was already obvious to me as someone who is very well versed on this topic beforehand, before the Gaza genocide, but now it is absolutely undeniable. You simply cannot watch people like this making those sorts of arguments and seriously argue that they are not simply anti-Palestinianists interested in doing whatever part they can to spread propaganda and enable an ongoing genocide to continue.
Based. Okay. The public debt of the Union would be a further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. The apportionment in the first instance and the progressive extinguishment afterward would be alike productive of ill humor and animosity. How would it be possible to agree upon a rule of apportionment satisfactory to all? There is scarcely any that can be proposed which is entirely free from real objections. Talking about the debt that the Union has incurred, how would you divvy it up amongst the states if they decided to become disunionized? These, as usual, would be exaggerated by the adverse interest of the parties. There are even dissimilar views among the states as to the general principle of discharging the public debt. Some of them, either less impressed with the importance of national credit, or because their citizens have little, if any, immediate interest in the question, feel an indifference, if not a repugnance, to the payment of the domestic debt at any rate. These would be inclined to magnify the difficulties of a distribution. Others of them, a numerous body of whose citizens are creditors to the public, beyond proportion of the state in the total amount of the national debt, would be strenuous for some equitable and effective provision. The procrastinations of the former would excite the resentments of the latter. The settlement of a rule would, in the meantime, be postponed by real differences of opinion and affected delays. The citizens of the states interested would clamor, foreign powers would urge for the satisfaction of their just demands, and the peace of the states would be hazarded to the double contingency of external invasion and internal contention. Basically, some people have lent money to the Union, some people have borrowed from the Union, or the Union has borrowed money, and there'd be like a disagreement between how to even settle these debts afterwards. Let's see, all of this was 7. He also argues that the debt assumed by the Union would be impossible to fairly apportion. It would lead to a great deal of conflict. Suppose the difficulties of agreeing upon a rule surmounted and the apportionment made. Still, there is great room to suppose that the rule agreed upon would, upon experiment, be found to bear harder upon some states than upon others. Those which were sufferers by it would naturally seek for a mitigation of the burden. The others would as naturally be disinclined to a revision, which was likely to end in an increase of their own encumbrances. The refusal would be too plausible a pretext to the complaining states to withhold their contributions, not to be embraced with avidity, and the non-compliance of these states with their engagements would be a ground of bitter discussion and altercation. If even the rule adopted should in practice justify the equality of its principle, still delinquencies in payments on the parts of some of these states would result from a diversity of other causes, the real deficiency of resources, the mismanagement of their finances, accidental disorders in the management of the government, and, in addition to the rest, the reluctance with which men commonly part with money for purposes that have outlived the exigencies which produce them and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. Basically, there's a whole bunch of reasons why people wouldn't pay shit back, and it would fuck shit up. Delinquencies, from whatever causes, would be productive of complaints, recriminations, and quarrels. There is perhaps nothing more likely to disturb the tranquility of nations than their being bound to mutual contributions for any common object that does not yield an equal and coincident benefit. For it is an observation, as true as it is trite, that there is nothing men differ so readily about as the payment of money. Laws in violation of private contracts, as they amount to aggressions on the rights of those states whose citizens are injured by them, may be considered as another probable source of hostility. We are not authorized to expect that a more liberal or more equitable spirit would preside over the legislations of the individual states hereafter. If unrestrained by any additional checks than we have heretofore seen in too many instances, disgracing their several codes. We have observed the disposition to retaliation excited in Connecticut in consequence of the enormities perpetuated by the legislature of Rhode Island, and we reasonably infer that in similar cases, under other circumstances, a war, not of parchment but of the sword, would chastise such atrocious breaches of moral obligation and social justice. Basically, that states wouldn't give fair trials, I guess, to fair trials to other citizens of other states if they had like issues with them, and basically just like we need to work together or all of our shit's gonna be fucked, I guess, right? The probability of incompatible alliances between the different states of confederacies and different foreign nations and the effects of this situation upon the peace of the whole have been sufficiently unfolded in some preceding papers. From the view they have exhibited of this part of the subject, this conclusion is to be drawn that America, if not connected at all, or only by the feeble tie of a simple league, offensive and defensive, would, by the operation of such jarring alliances, be gradually entangled in all the pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars, and by the destructive contentions of the parts into which she was divided, would be likely to become a prey to the artifices and machinations of powers equally the enemies of them all. Divide et impera must be the motto of every nation that either hates or fears us. Basically, like, look at Europe. These guys trade, they do all this other shit, but guess what? They still fucking fight all the time. Why the fuck are we going to divide ourselves up like the European losers have? If we do that, we're going to fuck ourselves. Listen, every single external enemy that we have, all of them know that the only way to conquer us is to divide us. So divide divide et impera must be the motto of every nation that either hates or fears us. I don't know what this stands for, but I'm guessing like divide and conquer or something. Oh, divide and command. Okay. Emerge in America if the United States were to break apart into multiple confederacies. He outlined what will be your dismissal as a country. Divide and conquer, it's a precept. I don't know what you mean by that. Dismissal as a country? I think you just outlined what would cause the country to, or what would cause everything to fuck up, basically. Okay. Do I have time to read this in 12 minutes? Federalist number 8. Sure. Okay. The consequences of hostilities between the states. Assuming it therefore as an established truth that the several states, in case of disunion or such combinations of them as might happen to be formed out of the wreck of the general confederacy, would be subject to those vicissitudes of peace and war, of friendship and enmity with each other, which have fallen to the lot of all neighboring nations, not united under one government, let us enter into a concise detail of some of the consequences that would attend such a situation. So basically saying, like, we know that we're going to fight if we don't form a union, and here's what's going to happen if we do fight, okay? War between the states in the first period of their separate existence would be accompanied with much greater distresses than it commonly is in those countries where regular military establishments have long obtained. The disciplined armies always kept on foot on the continent of Europe, though they bear a malignant aspect to liberty and economy, have, notwithstanding, been productive of the signal advantage of rendering sudden conquests impracticable and of preventing that rapid desolation which used to mark the progress of war prior to their introduction. The art of fortification has contributed to the same ends. The nations of Europe are encircled with chains of fortified places which mutually obstruct invasion. Campaigns are wasted in reducing 2 or 3 frontier garrisons to gain admittance into an enemy's country. Similar impediments occur at every step, to exhaust the strength and delay the progress of an invader. Formerly, an invading army would penetrate into the heart of a neighboring country almost as soon as intelligence of its approach could be received. But now a comparatively small force of disciplined troops acting on the defensive with the aid of posts is able to impede and finally to frustrate the enterprises of one much more considerable. The history of war in that quarter of the globe is no longer a history of nations subdued and empires overturned, but of towns taken and retaken, of battles that decide nothing, of retreats more beneficial than victories, of much effort and little acquisition. So he's saying that, like, listen, Europe, they've built forts, they've got whole lines of fortifications and garrisons. When these guys go to war with each other, it's not like they can do much damage, right? They basically fight with each other back and forth, blah, 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 or whatever. That's what he's saying. He's playing a Destiny clip on stream.
Democratic Party of America, let them go do events with those people. Jesus. Why would you cuck out so hard to these losers? Hasan shouldn't be anywhere near the DNC.
True.
Brianna Joy Gray, I don't know if she gets invited to shit. Nobody for Breaking Points, Kyle Kulinski included, I'm sorry. Maybe, actually.
I like that he's the one who's like deciding, like in his mind, guy who doesn't even know what the fuck the DSA is deciding who gets to be invited to the DNC.
The DSA? You mean that failure of an organization that has failed to turn out candidates, fundraise effectively? That what does he mean? What?
Me, I didn't go, but
Who the fuck cares about the DSA?
I'll give him. He's a little.
Okay, I'm good. He said DNC? No, he just said DSA. Isn't the DSA the Democratic Socialists of America Party or whatever? The Democratic Socialists of America. But I don't think these guys have accomplished or achieved much of anything. So I don't know what the point of even. Okay. These are the guys who refused our canvassing help, I think, in one of the states, and turned out 4 canvassers when we had like 300. But I think if somebody can find the picture on Twitter, they have a picture they took of their canvassing event. I think it was like 4 or 5 people that showed up. Why would anyone refuse canvassing help? Because I wasn't pure enough for them. Pretty good. This essay argues for how catastrophic a war would be in the newly formed American Confederates were they to break apart. In this country, the scene would be altogether reversed. The jealousy of military establishments would postpone them as long as possible. The want of fortifications, leaving the frontiers of one state open to another, would facilitate inroads. The populous states would, with little difficulty, overrun their less populous neighbors. Conquest would be as easy to be made as difficult to be retained. War, therefore, would be desultory and predatory. Plunder and devastation ever march in the train of irregulars. The calamities of individuals would make the principal figure in the events which would characterize our military exploits. This picture is not too highly wrought, though I confess it would not long remain a just one. Safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Even the ardent love of liberty will, after a time, give way to its dictates. The violent destruction of life and property incident to war, the continual effort and alarm attendant on a state of continual danger, will compel nations the most attached to liberty to resort for repose and security to institutions which have a tendency to destroy their civil and political rights. To be more safe, they at length become more willing to run the risk of being less free. That's a good quote. The institutions chiefly alluded to are standing armies and the correspondent appendages of military establishments. Standing armies, it is said, are not provided against in the new Constitution, and it is therefore inferred that they may exist under it. Enumerated powers, remember? Their existence, however, from the very terms of the proposition is, at most, problematical and uncertain. But standing armies, it may be replied, must inevitably result from a dissolution of the Confederacy. Frequent war and constant apprehension, which require a state of as constant preparation, will infallibly produce them. The weaker states or confederacies would first have recourse to them to put themselves upon an equality with their more potent neighbors. They would endeavor to supply the inferiority of population and resources by a more regular and effective system of defense, by disciplined troops and by fortifications. They would at the same time be necessitated to strengthen the executive arm of government, in doing which their constitutions would acquire a progressive direction toward monarchy. It is of the nature of war to increase the executive at the expense of the legislative authority. Basically saying that like smaller confederacies would have to become more and more militarized in order to maintain their security against the larger confederacies. Just bad things would happen. The expedients which have been mentioned would soon give the states or confederacies that made use of them a superiority over their neighbors. Small states or states of less natural strength under vigorous governments and with the assistance of disciplined armies have often triumphed over large states or states of greater natural strength which have been destitute of these advantages. Neither the pride nor the safety of the more important states or confederacies would permit them long to submit to this mortifying and adventitious superiority. They would quickly resort to means similar to those by which it had been effected to reinstate themselves in their lost preeminence. Thus, we should, in a little time, see established in every part of this country the same engines of despotism which have been the scourge of the old world. This, at least, would be the natural course of things, and our reasonings will be the most likely to be just in proportion as they are accommodated to this standard. So little states will make armies because they're afraid of being conquered by big states. Big states will make armies because they don't want to be conquered by more prepared smaller states, and it's all a big arms race until everybody's fucking each other over, basically. These are not vague inferences drawn from supposed or speculative defects in a constitution, the whole power of which is lodged in the hands of the people, or their representatives and delegates, but they are solid conclusions drawn from the natural and necessary progress of human affairs. It may perhaps be asked, by way of objection to this, why did not standing armies spring up out of the contentions which so often distracted the ancient republics of Greece? Different answers, equally satisfactory, may be given to this question. The industrious habits of the people of the present day, absorbed in the pursuit of gain and devoted to the improvements of agriculture and commerce, are incompatible with the condition of a nation of soldiers, which was the true condition of the people of those republics. The means of revenue, which have been so greatly multiplied by the increase of gold and silver, and of the arts of industry and the science of finance, which is the offspring of modern times, concurring with the habits of nations, have produced an entire revolution in the system of war, and have rendered disciplined armies, distinct from the body of the citizens, the inseparable companions of frequent hostility. I think he's saying that, like, well, so somebody might counter and say, okay, well, hold on, what about like Greece? Like, there were tons of different states and people around here, and they didn't make armies and conquer each other all the time. And he's saying, well, sure, but like back then, like if you were a man who could be in a military, you were probably out farming, or you had to do like other things. But now we've got massive industry, we have multiplicative wealth, we can do so many things. People have way more time to basically become part of a military and kill each other, I think, right? There is a wide difference also between military establishments in a country seldom exposed by its situation to internal invasions and in one which is often subject to them and always apprehensive of them. The rulers of the former can have a good pretext, if they are so inclined, to keep on foot armies so numerous as must of necessity be maintained in the latter. These armies being, in the first case, rarely, if at all, called into activity for interior defense, the people are in no danger of being broken to military subordination. The laws are not accustomed to relaxations. Greece at this point was under Ottoman control. Greece was seen in an idealized realm of type of... Oh, gotcha, okay. In favor of military exigencies, the civil state remains in full vigor, neither corrupted nor confounded with the principles or propensities of the other state. The smallness of the army renders the natural strength of the community an overmatch for it, and the citizens, not habituated to look up to the military power for protection or to submit to its oppressions, neither love nor fear the soldiery. They view them with a spirit of jealous acquiescence in a necessary evil and stand ready to resist a power which they suppose may be exerted to the prejudice of their rights. The army under such circumstances may usefully aid the magistrate to suppress a small faction or an occasional mob or insurrection, but it will be unable to enforce encroachments against the united efforts of the great body of the people. So basically, like, I think this is just talking about it would be impossible to keep a small army to maintain the population because people wouldn't be happy if there was a big army and a small army wouldn't be able to stop the people from rebelling or whatever. I guess. I don't know. It's kind of what this is talking about. We're almost done with this. Fuck, hold on. Peace Coast coming. Shh. 5 paragraphs. 4. In a country in the predicament last described, the contrary of all this happens. The perpetual menacings of danger oblige the government to be always prepared to repel it. Its armies must be numerous enough for instant defense. So this is saying, so the country would keep a much larger army to be able to fight off insurrecting population. The continual necessity for their services enhances the importance of the soldier and proportionally degrades the condition of the citizen. The military state becomes elevated above the civil. The inhabitants of territories, often the theater of war, are unavoidably subjected to frequent infringements on their rights, which serve to weaken their sense of those rights, and by degrees the people are brought to consider the soldiery not only as their protectors but as their superiors. The transition from this disposition to that of considering them masters is neither remote nor difficult, but it is very difficult to prevail upon a people under such impressions to make a bold or effectual resistance to usurpation supported by the military power. The Kingdom of Great Britain falls within the first description, an insular situation and a powerful marine guarding it in a great measure against the possibility of foreign invasion supersede the necessity of a numerous army within the kingdom. A sufficient force to make head against a sudden descent till the militia could have time to rally and embody is all that has been deemed requisite. No motive of national policy is demanded, nor would public opinion have tolerated a larger number of troops upon its domestic establishment. There has been for a long time past little room for the operation of the other causes, which has been enumerated as the consequences of internal war. This peculiar felicity of situation has, in a great degree, contributed to preserve the liberty which that country to this day enjoys, in spite of the prevalent venality and corruption. If, on the contrary, Britain had been situated on the continent and had been compelled, as she would have been by that situation, to make her military establishments at home coextensive with those of the other great powers of Europe, she, like them, would in all probability be at this day a victim to the absolute power of a single man. Tis possible, though not easy, that the people of that island may be enslaved from other causes, but it cannot be by the prowess of an army so inconsiderable as that which has been usually kept up within the kingdom. Sorry, I'm almost done here. So because Britain is one of the things, the island of Great Britain has unified into a single country. They don't have to keep like all these internal armies to fight with each other and all this. And because of their unity, the people enjoy basically more freedoms and are being stripped from them as a result of having to keep a giant military state, basically. If we are wise enough to preserve the Union, we may for ages enjoy an advantage similar to that of an insulated situation. Europe is at a great distance from us. Her colonies in our vicinity will be likely to continue too much disproportioned in strength to be able to give us any dangerous annoyance. Extensive military establishment cannot, in this position, be necessary to our security. But if we should be disunited and the integral parts should either remain separated or, which is most probable, should be thrown together into 2 or 3 confederacies, we should be, in a short course of time, in the predicament of the continental powers of Europe. Our liberties would be a prey to the means of defending ourselves against the ambition and jealousy of each other. This is an idea not superficial or futile, but solid and weighty. It deserves the most serious and mature consideration of every prudent and honest man of whatever party. If such men will make a firm and solemn pause, and meditate dispassionately on the importance of this interesting idea, if they will contemplate it in all its attitudes and trace it to all its consequences, they will not hesitate to part with trivial objections to a constitution, the rejection of which would, in all probability, put a final period to the Union. The airy phantoms that flit before the distempered imaginations of some of its adversaries would quickly give place to the more substantial forms of dangers, real, certain, and formidable. Jesus. Okay. This is number 8. If states were constantly warring with one another and had larger armies, then freedoms of its citizens would necessarily be curtailed, and the soldiery and militaries would be seen as superior to the ordinary citizens, and the states would be dedicating a large amount of their resources and leadership to simply maintaining their militaries. Okay. Nice. Mike from PA unbanned. Cute. Whew, okay. Pisco wants me to retweet a guy who called us, apparently he called us fags, but he does like a music video. I don't know what am I supposed to like make fun of him for doing music? I don't know what you want me to say. That's mean. I don't do that. That's the Majority Report stuff, okay? Okay. All right. What is this? Space even over? Question mark. Oh, maybe actually. Hasan is trying to pre-poison Destiny's reach out to Dems. That's why he's been covering Destiny and Lunar since the election. Democrats will soon attempt to secure a foothold in online media. They will have to loosen up their current rigid conduct standards for group personalities. They're also clueless about the online media landscape and haven't done any research. Hasan is trying to make it look like Destiny's conduct cost is as bad or worse than his. Then, with his seemingly larger numbers, he will look the better offer to take. He just needs to target the time frame when Dems will be doing research. If you hit pieces by friendly hack journalists, his clips and videos and top results into Destiny. Oh, maybe. Maybe, who knows? None of this changes the fact, though, that like Hasan didn't support the candidate. You're not supporting. You don't even support the candidate. The Democrats have no reason to work with you, and they shouldn't. But you should also have no problem with that. You can't make fun of people at the table and then also ask to be invited to the table at the same time. Like, accept it. Accept one or the other, right? What to expect. Okay, I don't know what title this space should be. That? The Dems could still be interested. I think Hasan could be convinced to support the candidate. That will never happen unless Hasan, unless they pick a candidate that would never win an election. That's just not. Please don't be way too confident that common sense will win out. Trump is president. Hasan can absolutely get the Democratic Party approval over you and blacklist you. Maybe. Listen, this is like my behind-the-scenes strategy, okay? I'm barking up a few trees right now from people trying to basically like work my way to see how deep into the DNC I can go. I don't need any credit for anything I've done in the past. Like, basically my goal would just be to prove what we can do. So I think the dream would be give me access to somebody at the DNC. Give me access to one campaign that is close-ish in the 2026 midterms, and I'll show you how much we can turn out for this candidate. I can turn out 500 plus canvassers for a candidate. I can run the entire ground game for a federal election, guaranteed. At this point, with my people, better than they can run it. I know it. I know for a fact I can. I can get bigger turnout. I can get more effective integration with things like minivan, everything else. Like I know I can. I know 100% we can do this. Yeah, that's all I'm looking for. Give me access to one swing state candidate, or like one, not swing state candidate, one like winnable district. I don't want some fucking deep, like loser fucking whatever, and see what we can turn out. That's all I want. And then they can see how they like it from there. That's what I want. That's the dream, but. Boom, boom. Boom, boom. Okay. I think it started, question mark? You would have better luck talking to specific county parties as the national campaigns. Suck at coordinating with counties. No, I think we have I think we look more legitimate helping a federal election spot. I don't know if I feel comfortable trying to drive my community to like a state level election. I feel like it might be a little bit too outsider. And I would rather be more involved with a federal level seat. Yeah. What about a state governor's race? That'd be cool too, but that might be a little bit too important. I don't know.